For those of you that are hardcore or even casual fans of overpowered bald guys, we know that One Punch Man is a series full of comical relief and incredible action sequences. I mean, really, it's what it's known for. However, these aspects of the series can sometimes overshadow the honestly incredible writing that brings it all together. I mean, this series is probably the first one I've ever read where I found myself actively rooting for the villain throughout his entire run. If that's not great writing, then I don't know what is. Along with well-written characters, the creator of One Punch Man, is a master of writing engaging plot lines and building up his story arcs to have an incredibly satisfying payoff in the end. Well, what if I told you guys there's an arc in One Punch Man that is currently going on that has actually been slowly building up since the very beginning of the series? An arc that we as readers have been slowly getting spoon-fed new developments on as the story has gone along, with most of us probably not even realizing it. I'm of course referring to the God arc, the supposed endgame of One Punch Man, where God, the unfathomably powerful final villain of the series, will finally be resurrected. An arc that'll see a universal God fighting one-on-one with a God for fun. Well, the big question for me is how? How are we going to get to this cataclysmic and world-ending final battle? That's a pretty big question, and I think I have a pretty big answer. And I think by the end of this video, the answer might leave you not being able to see One Punch Man the same way again, because the amount of information hidden in plain sight throughout the entire series and all the moving characters and plot lines happening behind the scenes to make this all come together is honestly pretty damn eye-popping. So get your tinfoil hats on and get ready for quite the theory ride as we try and uncover the end of One Punch Man. So what do we know about God at this point? Well, he's freaking massive. So massive, in fact, that he has to be in a fetal position to fit his physical body inside of the moon. We've also seen throughout the manga that he is able to communicate with humans telepathically in several ways. Coming into direct contact with mysterious cubes scattered around the planet is one way. Another way is by having a weak heart and despising humanity so much that God takes notice and grants you power in hopes of carrying out his will. The third way, which we'll be primarily covering in this video, is by being an Esper who has gained the third eye ability and is able to see into the future. Regardless of how someone in the One Punch Man story makes contact with God, the result is almost always the same. God appears with a single primary goal: to grant power to those who will carry on his will, and in some cases, even wanting them to become his full-on avatar. With all this in mind, you gotta ask yourself, why is God working in such a sly and cunning way if he has power so great that even sharing a sliver of it produces a planet-busting, God-level threat like Cosmic Fear Garo? Well, the simple answer is that he has to, and the reason for that is the result of a massive event that took place many years before the events of the current manga. Surprisingly, we've already been secretly told of this massive event by One himself in the only way he knows how, through comic relief. I'm sure many of you have been told ad nauseum by other YouTubers at this point how chapter 119 of the webcomic is One's clever way of revealing the endgame of the series while hiding it in plain sight. For those of you who don't know what I'm talking about, in chapter 119 of the webcomic, we see Saitama fight off a random guy claiming to carry the power of the dragon blood. Well, after making quick work of him, we're told by these weird guys in medieval armor that Saitama has just stepped into a centuries-old battle between a group called the Saints and another group called Deathbone. They claim that long ago, there was a cruel dragon that appeared that was so fearsome that it created large-scale destruction and death across the entire planet, and it wasn't until many great warriors gathered to fight this dragon that they were able to weaken him. In his weakened state, his essence was sealed away by sorcerers into 9 cube-shaped seal stones and scattered them into 9 temples. Saitama then goes on to speedrun the temples and one-shots the resurrected dragon. The reason people claim the cruel dragon is a parallel to God is primarily because there is a pretty clear connection between the seal stones and the God cubes, where they both seem to have the same purpose of sealing them away. This theory was also given some legs during Garo and Saitama's battle, where a massive blow from Garo sent shockwaves throughout the entire planet and uncovered a mysterious temple from the ocean, which also had a dragon statue that greatly resembles the cruel dragon. Whether or not the God cubes function in the same way as the seal stones by locking away the essence of God, at the very least, I believe he was sealed away in a similar way that was told in the Cruel Dragon story, because it explains why God has to use all of these underhanded tactics to carry on his plan of resurrection. However, God is not alone in this goal, and his influence reaches much farther than you might think right now. In chapter 173 of the manga, we're introduced to a mysterious and powerful Esper with stitches across his forehead. He appeared at a Hero Association prison to claim Psychos, someone he states is essential to the research of the Tsukiyomi, which for those of you who don't know, literally translates to moon god in English. He claims that Psychos' mutated body and third eye ability are particularly important to them, and in chapter 174, it's revealed by Tatsumaki that the mysterious man is from the research group that kept her captive as a child. And on top of that, they are also in the business of creating artificial espers, the mysterious man being one of them. Chapter 174 also speaks of a psychic research group called the Invisible Hand, so it's possible that Tsukiyomi are the artificial espers themselves, and the Invisible Hand is the group that creates them. Even on the surface, this comes as a massive reveal, but digging deeper into the implications of this information, a whole can of worms opens up and reveals a connective tissue that makes everything come together. Taking a look at Tatsumaki's flashback, where she is a young kid being experimented on at the research facility where she was held captive, one day a dangerous hybrid monster broke out of his incubation and wreaked havoc on the whole place. Tatsumaki was ready to accept death before being saved by Blast. We then see in her conversation with Blast immediately after that he is also holding a God Cube, alluding to the fact that the research facility was holding it and using it as a part of their research. So there's a lot going on in this flashback, but the main things I want to focus on here are the cube, the hybrid monsters, and the fact that we now know that espers are being artificially created here. Seeing as how the Invisible Hand is keen on obtaining the third eye ability, it's possible that this ability not only serves as a way to see into the future, but also serves as a way to reach God himself. At this point, it's made pretty clear that God's physical body is being stored in the moon, and his consciousness is the entity that actually is granting the power to humans and is influencing the earth. He's pretty much a ghost floating around doing his evil godly deeds and such. As seen in chapter 164, where God appears before Garo to grant him power, no one else but him is able to actually see God. On top of that, in chapter 171, Sitch explains that Blast is the only one that can actually fight against God, since he is the only one that can manipulate space and time. This leads to the conclusion that God is currently operating in this multi-dimensional space, separated from the world that can be perceived by humans. Since the third eye ability allows one to see into the future, it might be inherently allowing the user to break the dimensional barrier separating God from the earth, seeing as how observing time like this is only possible in a fourth dimensional space, meaning God is on a different plane than everybody else, and the only way to reach that plane is by obtaining multi-dimensional abilities like being able to see into the future. This could also explain why God appeared at the moment Garo was teaching Saitama how to time travel, this action creating a temporary break in the dimensional barrier separating God from Earth, a barrier that is also alluded to by Blast himself. I actually theorized in a video I made a few months ago that this facility was where artificial espers like potentially Gearspur were being created, and with this actually turning out to be the case, it kind of left me wondering why they would be doing this while also researching the cube and creating these hybrid monsters. Well, there are two possibilities to explain this, but they both lead to the same result. One possibility is that the Invisible Hand is creating these hybrid monsters to create a strong enough vessel for God. Seeing as how they have a cube, it wouldn't be a stretch to assume that they have made contact with God and are working alongside him to create a worthy vessel for his resurrection. After all, we saw God not only try to grant power to Garo, but have him become his full-on avatar, so it would make sense that he'd put an emphasis on creating a worthy vessel. However, I think there's a much more likely possibility that reveals a much bigger web of God collaborators. I think the Invisible Hand's primary task is to create artificial espers
monsters as a small part of a larger plan, and creating the hybrid monsters is a task put on them by a bigger and much more dangerous group. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the organization at this point, the ominous group working behind the scenes with unexplained motives. We've seen them unleash machine gods throughout the story with the intentions of collecting battle data, with one of them even being sent to assist the Monster Association. Their end goal seems to be a mystery at this point, but if the old saying is true, actions speak louder than words. Like I alluded to earlier, their main purpose up until this point is to collect battle data, and they've gone about doing this in several ways throughout the story, one being through the aforementioned machine gods, and another by using data collected from the battle suits stolen by Hammerhead and the Paradisers. It's also been theorized that the battle suits that are currently being used by the Neo heroes in the webcomic continuity and the ones used by the Paradisers are the same. This theory also states that the cyborgified monsters that Child Emperor is currently studying are also a product of the organization, allowing them to collect double the data from battles between heroes wearing the suits and the powered up hybrid monsters they've created. Now I gotta ask you guys at this point, where have we seen hybrid monsters being created before? Probably get where I'm going here, right? This is where everything starts to come full circle. Well, before we flesh all of that out, we have to zero in on a few specific characters in the story. There are 2 or potentially 3 characters involved in all of this that brings all of it together. The first being Fuzzy, the creator of the Neo heroes. It's revealed in chapter 137 of the webcomic that Fuzzy is actually the son of the late and great seer, Lady Shababua, who is the one who died just after predicting the terrible future awaiting humanity, aka God's arrival. It's also stated that he too possesses the third eye ability to see into the future. With this crucial bit of information in mind, his creation of the Neo heroes retroactively makes a lot of sense. If he's able to break into this dimensional space that we talked about earlier by using his ability and can communicate with God, it's likely that he is a disciple of God's that is working towards his resurrection as well. Seeing as how the organization also has this goal, Fuzzy could have easily been reached out to by them to create a scenario where they can freely collect data they need through the already ongoing battle between humans and monsters by injecting hybrid monsters and battle suits into the equation, hiding everything in plain sight. Now, there is also another major player in all of this, which leads us to Metal Knight and Drive Knight. Now, I'm not going to get into the whole theory of whether Drive Knight is a traitor who is secretly working with the organization or if it's in fact Metal Knight doing this. Regardless of where you stand on this debate, I want to emphasize a conversation between Drive Knight and Genos that might have a larger relevance than we originally thought, now that we have all of this context in mind. In chapter 139 of the webcomic, Drive Knight reveals that the reason he told Genos to stay away from Metal Knight earlier in the series was to protect him from Dr. Bufoy. Drive Knight then points out that it would be a real problem if Bufoy were to get his hands on the technology behind Genos' reinforced muscle fibers, artificial nerves, and energy core. Again, whether or not Drive Knight is telling the truth here, or he's actually just projecting his intentions onto Metal Knight, it's not important to the overall plan. In this conversation, it's made clear that whoever is working with the organization is after the technology behind Genos. This could explain why the organization sent several machine gods to destroy Dr. Kuseno's lab and kill him. It's likely they were looking to retrieve data that could allow them to replicate Kuseno's process of creating Genos' body to then create stronger and more durable hybrid monsters. Unfortunately, they may have also struck gold if they were somehow able to retrieve the data collected by the incubation chamber Saitama was sleeping in just before they showed up. On top of the hybrid monsters, if they are also looking to create the perfect vessel for God, all of this data would further their progress towards this goal greatly. With all of this information in mind, we can paint a clear plan and many moving parts with the organization at the top of this operation. The organization teamed up with the Invisible Hand, who is also currently working toward creating a stable connection with God through artificial espers, in hopes that one of these espers obtains the third eye ability that could then make that connection possible. On their end, the organization is giving the information and the data needed to create these hybrid monsters, or even creating them themselves as well, that again are being used to either collect more data that will then lead to creating a powerful enough vessel for God, or creating a hybrid monster that can be the vessel itself. On an individual level, followers like Drive Knight or Dr. Bufoy work behind the scenes to gather the resources needed for these two groups to further their research, while Fuzzy sets sets the stage for data to be gathered through the information collected from these battle suits created by the organization and the hybrid monsters that will now be enhanced even further through Dr. Kuseno's research. All of this taking place with a single goal in mind: the eventual arrival of God himself. Now, for all of you that couldn't follow all of that, the organization is in charge of creating the vessel for God, and the invisible hand is in charge of creating that necessary connection between God and the world for him to actually fuse with this worthy vessel, which of course apparently needs to all take place on the altar that we see during the Monster Association arc. All the dirty work and all the stuff that's making this plan possible is being done by the foot soldiers of God, that being Fuzzy and Drive Knight / Dr. Bufoy. Well, that's all I've got for you guys today, so you can now take off your tinfoil hats. I am very curious to know what your thoughts are on all of this, if any of this stuff made sense to you, or if you guys think I'm freaking insane. Either opinion is valid, and I want to hear about it in the comments section, so let's have a conversation here. And if you enjoyed this video, you're going to enjoy all of the other One Punch Man content I have on this channel, so you definitely want to make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, along with liking this video if you enjoyed it, so you can get constant One Punch Man content each and every week. Well, that does it for this one, guys. I hope you have an absolutely wonderful day, and I'll see you guys in the next video.